All right, podcast number 11. We're talking fatty fats. We've already gone over protein and carbohydrates in our previous two, so this is our last of the macronutrient podcast. We're not going to go over alcohol because we're probably
Although
all
we
too
love
familiar with
alcohol.
it anyway.
Way
So,
too familiar.
yeah, what is a fat? Fat are chains of, uh, I guess, fatty acids is the term. So, depending on how long the chain is, it makes different fats and they have different properties. But essentially, what you need to know what they do in our body, they're pretty damn important. Uh, they're key to hormone production, storing soluble fat soluble vitamins in our body. Fat protects our organs. Fat encases all of our cells, um, and they store energy. If you have a caloric excess, you're going to store it as fat for later use. So they get used in tons and tons of ways in our body, and it's kind of nice to see the trend of low fat everything getting mixed a little bit. Um, only reason
Yeah,
I
but
can
it's
think
the expense of carbs, God damn it. Anyways,
of
that's another thing.
yeah, the only thing I can think of reason why people demonize fat is because it has the highest calorie count per gram. It's the most caloric dense at 9 calories per gram. Other than that, it's got a whole lot of good properties for us. Um, suppose we can go over what kind of fats we need and how much. When you guys want to cover that a little bit,
That's a mad subject.
is that a Matt
Oh,
subject?
that's a Matt subject,
All
I
right,
say.
we can share some of those. Let's everyone talks about saturated fat, the bad fat. What do you guys
Right.
say on that?
Well, all right. Well, actually, I just very recently posted an article that touches on this on our blog at imfitcast.wordpress.com. It's mostly has to do with choosing cooking oils and that sort of thing, but yeah. So you've got
Read about
saturated. Yeah, go ahead.
read about Matt's recommended farts on IMFit today.
We're all
So
going to hell,
go ahead,
especially you.
Matt.
All right,
Uh,
so people always ask me this where I work. The people who don't claim to know everything the moment that they walk in the door, anyway. Um, People always talk about saturated fats versus unsaturated fats, that sort of thing. And as far as what you need and how much of it that you need, yes, saturated fat is the thing you need the least of. Then you've got the unsaturated fats, the polyunsaturated and monounsaturated, and those are the ones that everybody say is the good fats. That's kind of not 100% true in the context of how it's usually represented. They're represented as something that can reduce heart disease and that sort of thing. And what you often don't hear or don't read on packaging is the other half of that equation, which is this has a tendency to reduce heart disease if you replace trans fats and saturated fats with this stuff. So once again, don't believe everything, or better yet, don't believe anything that you read on packaging that is meant to sell you something. Then we've also got the trans fats. Those are the ones that are unequivocally bad. Those are fats that have been hydrogenated. They've had hydrogen added to them and bonded to them to make them solid at room temperature so that they ship well and last longer on the shelf. This was an important invention way back when during the Great War, when they, came up with this idea and had to have fats that could be moved to war zones and stored in less than ideal conditions before being used. Then they were used for the longest time in the form of shortenings and that sort of thing before it came to light that, holy shit, are these things bad for you? So in America, at least, we were given a 3-year deadline before almost all trans fats had to be removed from most prepackaged materials, things like potato chips, that sort of thing. We've got 1 year left on that deadline, so there could still be some trans fats bombs out there, but by and large, they're pretty much gone from packaged foods. You still can buy trans fats on the shelf in the form of vegetable shortenings and things like that. Just read the packaging and make sure you're not getting too much or ideally any trans fats into your diet. Those are not something that you need to have as opposed to the rest of them.
Covering pretty well here.
Yeah.
We had a similar ban in old Kanukistan. Trans fats have basically gone by the wayside of the dinosaurs and all those other wonderful, awful things that people have abandoned. Hooray for trans fats being gone because they suck balls.
Does anybody remember, I think the early 90s, there was a product called Olean that hit the shelves? Remember that?
The chips that
I don't know if you got that in America's hat up there, but Olean was the name of this oil that hit the shelf that it was less something you would buy as an oil, and it was more something you were going to find potato chips and that sort of thing fried in. They had these special products that were cooked in Olean that was supposed to be so much healthier for you, and that was 100% trans fat. So what was happening is people were eating all of this, and then their butts were leaking. Very, very literally, they would just be sitting there talking and go, "I'm sitting in a puddle. What the hell? Oh, I'm sitting in a puddle of my own feces. This is nice."
Yeah, those didn't last in the
those got pulled real damn quick. So, non sequitur.
All right, when we're talking other fats, cholesterol's brought up a lot, and I know you mainly talk about eggs when you talk about cholesterol. Back and forth, don't eat eggs, they're fine, they're bad. And they're finally starting to realize that dietary cholesterol, the cholesterol that you eat, doesn't really affect the cholesterol in your bloodstream. So that's good news if you enjoy eggs, because you can eat your damn eggs and not have to worry about it.
I can eat my French toast guilt-free. All right.
No, you should be really fucking guilty. Nasty ketchup eating bitch.
So it's good news in that you don't have to avoid cholesterol completely when you're, eating whatever, but it's still one of those things. It's still a fat. It's still, calorically dense, so you're not going to go overboard on it. Try to mix up your fat sources, and you'll be all right.
Track your calories, and then you won't have to worry about it ever.
There's that. Okay. There is, when we start talking about the omega fatty acids, typically omega-3 and omega-6 are the biggies that come up in diets a lot. Matt, you seem to be our fat knowledge here.
I was the fattest among us at one point.
You were the fattest among us. So, I know the ratio is important. Why is that?
Well, it bears mentioning omega-3 and omega-6 are the fatty acids that we need, our bodies need, that we cannot produce. Our bodies, that has to come from food. Our bodies can't make those. The ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 that we have within us is very important because, you're supposed to have anywhere from a ratio of 1 to 1 all the way up to maybe 1 to 3, and that's omega-6 to omega-3. And what we end up, or maybe it's the other way around. How did I say that?
Other way around. You want more.
It's the other way around. You're right.
Yeah.
What we end up having more of in the typical Western diet is a ratio of 1 to 14 and as high as maybe 1 to 20, maybe 1 to 22, and that's bad. You want to think on something like that our bodies need, that more is better, and that's not the case because our bodies break those down in a very specific way. There are enzymes that are keyed only to breaking down omega fatty acids, and they only break down a certain amount of them, and they're very competitive with each other. And what that means is that we don't have some that break down omega-3 and some that break down omega-6. They all just search out and find the first omega they find and start breaking it down. And if you have too high of a ratio one way or the other, then what ends up happening is it's going to break down, for example, it's going to find a whole shit ton of omega-6 and break all that down and then be done. And you're going to get no benefits from having ingested omega-3. Where I take issue is when people say, oh, you need to get more omega-3. You need to get more omega-3 in your diet. You need to eat more salmon. You need to take fish oil. You need to get more omega-3. And while not 100% wrong, that's a very short-sighted view of things. Because of the competitive nature of the enzymes that break down our omegas, getting more omega-3 to try to balance out the fact that we have such a high percentage of omega-6 in our diet is it's short-sighted because it doesn't work very well. Those competitive enzymes, they still seek out and find the first omega they come to. So putting more 3 in our system it doesn't serve to dilute the 6 as much as you think it does. And it really just results in there being too much of it in your body. You've got way too much for the enzymes that are there to break it down. The much better way of looking at things would be to get the right amount of the right foods so that you don't have such a gross imbalance of omega-3 to omega-6. And our imbalance for omega-6 is caused mostly by our over-reliance upon vegetable oils. That's where we're getting most of our omega-6 from. A little bit of it comes from some of the foods that are fed to our cattle and chickens and pigs and so forth, but the vast majority of it comes from our over-reliance on vegetable oils. So start cutting that shit out of your diet as much as you can, and you're going to start to see that imbalance go away. And that imbalance is typical, especially in people that have really bad inflammation issues. And that's why everybody says that omega-3 is an anti-inflammatory. It's technically not. It's just the idea that if you can somehow correct that balance to some degree, then your inflammation goes down. So at the end of the day, the point of this long diatribe is stop eating so much, processed vegetable fat, and start looking at good sources for your fat, some fish, some avocados, some nuts, stuff like that.
Well, you kind of touched on it there, and you started talking about cooking oils when we were talking about saturated and trans fats and all that good stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of alluding to your blog post on our webpage. Like, is there an oil that you would prefer to cook with in the long run, or are you just trying to minimize the oil you use in general when you cook?
Well, no matter what you do, try to minimize the oil. At the end of the day, what oil is the most refined that you can possibly make a fat. And what that breaks down to, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is you've created something that is as calorically dense as you can make it. It's 100, give or take a calorie. It's about 120 calories per tablespoon for any and all of the oils you're typically going to find on the shelf. They add no volume to your food. They add no extra satiety. They add no fiber. So what it comes down to is the lubricant that you're using to cook your food in is literally nothing but straight calories. There are no vitamins, no minerals, anything like that. So if you are really good and only use a tablespoon of oil, you've just added 120 calories to your daily total that give you nothing in return. You get no vitamins, no fiber, and any of that other shit that I just mentioned. So, what's the benefit there? So you try to reduce that as much as you can, whether you're just not using it at all, whether you're trying to steam rather than fry, whether you're using like an oil spritzer rather than, actually dumping oil into the skillet, something like that. As far as which oil to choose, it really comes down to, knowing that they're all relatively equal in calories. It comes down to finding what ratio of types of fat are in any particular oil based on your goals. There are going to be a few people whose goal, for whatever reason, is to get more saturated fat, for example. Great, coconut oil or palm seed oil or something like that, they have very, very high saturated fat percentages. That's going to be a good oil. For most people, they're going to try to reduce the amount of saturated fat. So they're going to want something that has a higher percentage of unsaturated fat, which is going to be something like canola oil, rapeseed oil, that sort of thing. Um, Yeah, and I mentioned coconut oil, and my blog post touches on this very specifically, just by virtue of its popularity. Coconut oil is right at 90% saturated fat. 10% unsaturated, 90% saturated. I have absolutely no idea why everybody has hopped on this bandwagon that it is somehow a health food. There is no such thing as a healthy oil.
Yeah, I've heard something about the medium chain triglycerides, the MCT fats that they talk about.
That's the excuse. That's what you're going to hear. And it's not like that's 100% wrong. It's more bro science than anything else. What it is it's you've got medium chain triglycerides in the saturated fats that are found in coconut oil, and those taken with the L acid, I forget how to pronounce this, but the L acid that's found with the medium chain triglycerides is usually extracted so that in very concentrated doses, it's used in the medical industry to melt fat. It's used in surgeries and that sort of thing to literally melt tiny amounts of fat away from blood vessels that they have to do surgery on, that sort of thing. So there's been a field day with that particular piece of information, like, oh yeah, this stuff just melts the fat off you, which is absolute and total horseshit. At the end of the day, you're getting no real appreciable benefit from the triglycerides that you're ingesting at the levels that, even if you're, in order to get any kind of benefit out of that, you would have to be drinking coconut oil like you drink water, and then you're getting all the negative aspects of having drank all that oil, so nobody's going to do that shit. So at the end of the day, you're getting 90% of your oil intake is saturated fat, which, is that really what you want? There are times you're going to want to choose your oil based on taste, and coconut oil is one of those oils that tastes pretty damn good. So if you're cooking for taste and you're not worried about your fat content, have at it. I cook with butter all the time, but just don't fall for the hype that coconut oil is somehow the saving grace that's, you're going to replace all your other oil choices with it and it's going to make you healthy. It's just not.
This conversation has reminded me of the bulletproof coffee. And how they double down balls deep on the MCT in your coffee, and that's like fucking Jesus juice in a cup for your fasted day. And I was like, dude, you're just drinking like 500 calories of fat in a perfectly good cup of coffee, and then you're just not gonna eat the rest of the day. Okay, that's fine, but don't treat it like it's the magical fucking gateway to shreddedness and I'm so much better than you because I drank fatty ass coffee. Oh, okay. Yeah. If you like the taste of it, I don't want someone trying to bullshit me out of to convince me to spend 500 calories on a cup of coffee. It's just like, no. I might as well get a pumpkin spice latte and at least I'd get the sugar out of it, which is infinitely more useful for me than
all right. So we're talking about minimizing the oil that you cook with. Where are other places you guys get fat? I mean, immediately, nuts and avocado come to mind, but there's got to be other sources too that are easy for you.
Fish is the big one. If you're not a vegan, salmon is especially beloved in this country. I personally dislike the flavor of it, but people love salmon. Salmon's a good source of good fats. Any of the small bony oily fish like sardines or anchovies, they're going to be pretty good sources there. You want to avoid getting the majority of your fats from nuts just because so much of that type of fat is going to be saturated, but it's going to be a decent saturated as well. So that's where it starts to get complicated.
I'm bad for the nut butter being a good chunk of my fat source, but fish is just tough. Fish is just tough to come by here. At least it's cheap and like good quality. So it's just not something I'm going to invest a lot of time in. But if it's not, I do like to mix up with dairy and meat, obviously, because my background as a self-taught butcher means that if I want to kind of change it up with my fat intake through my meat intake, it's really easy for me to find something and make the most out of that. But I do try to minimize my oil usage because it really is just it's the closest thing to empty calories that I can think of that's not like literally just drinking sugar, like liquid sugar.
And I think when it
Your
comes to
dogs,
dairy,
your dogs don't like oil either.
I don't like it either. When it comes to dairy, I think we can all agree the more fat or full fat dairy products taste way better.
Oh yeah. The dairy is an interesting exception to a lot of rules, though, or milk specifically, I should say, because most products, when you see them say something like reduced fat or fat-free, and they're like a reduced fat version of something that is normally pretty fatty, then what they've done is they've either jacked up the numbers in such a way as the serving size is inappropriate to anything human, so that they can claim each serving only has this minuscule amount of fat, or more often, the fat that they've removed, they've replaced with a fuck ton of refined sugar. Which we've gone over this. Sugar isn't bad, but don't go dumping buckets of refined sugar into yourself. Milk, on the other hand, though, the trick with milk is that they're literally just removing fat, which is why skim milk, for people who are used to, say, whole milk, tastes kind of like water and ass. It's just because they've removed fat, and fat is flavor in a lot of applications. So that's the one instance I can think of where, you having some kind of reduced fat version, whether it's 2% or skim or something like that, isn't inherently worse for you. But that being said, why cheat yourself? You're going to cut like 10 calories to not have all that extra flavor. Go for whole milk, yeah.
Yeah, the only real calorie drop is going down to skim, but skim really doesn't taste all that good for anybody unless you have, like, sadness is what sustains you. So you're better off going with the 2 or 3% fat milk, just because the fats are good, and really the calorie difference between 1% and 3% is so minimal that if you really want to cut that calories, just don't drink the fucking milk. It's that simple. Because if you're fussing over a 20 calorie difference for a glass of milk, then you're not eating enough calories anyways, and that's a bigger problem.
Yeah,
And
speaking of calories, we kind of glossed over, we talked about when proteins, the recommended levels is like 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. When you're talking fats, it's more like 0.3 to 0.4 grams of fat per pound of body weight is a good area to live in. So if you're looking for a calorie goal, that's how you would find that. All right, what were you going to say on that? Sorry, I cut you off there.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that, for the people who are going to insist that fat is a horrible thing, that, you need to cut all fat, that fat makes you fat, which is unequivocally horse shit. It's a holdover from the 80s when fat was treated like carbs are treated now. Everything that you can eat that provides nutrition has fat in it. You may not believe this. Iceberg lettuce has saturated fat in it. I tell that to people where I work, and they look at me like I just sprouted a second head and shat their son out of my ass. But everything that you can eat has some degree of fat. Now, it's this minuscule small amount, but it's present. And, just kind of goes to show you, oh, fat isn't natural. No, oil isn't natural. Fat is extremely natural. You need it, for so many things, like Chris mentioned before. So stop with all of this, like, it needs to be fat-free shit. Just quit.
All right, well, I guess to kind of recap our little mini-series here. No. We talked about protein, fats, and carbs, your three main macronutrients. Any diet that tells you to cut out any one of those, stay the hell away. There's healthy regions for all this stuff. Your body needs all of these things, and a normal healthy diet's going to have a little bit of everything in it. So If you want to find out any more information,
Elimination diets.
just go ahead.
Elimination bullshit.
Yes, they are. They're not sustainable and they make you feel like ass. But for any more information on these kind of things or a little more specific details that we kind of glossed over here, you can go to our blog space at WordPress. It's IMFit Podcast at WordPress.com. We're continually trying to put up new articles up there to get some decent information out there on the net for people to, take in. It's not biased and trying to sell you detox shit.
Well, it is. To be fair, it is biased, but it's biased against sadness and misery and unnecessary effort. So, if you are lazy and you like lazy, come read our blog. 'Cause it's really
You'll
good.
love us.
Enabling lazy.
And that's most of you.
Yeah.
You know who you are. All right, guys. I think we can cut this one out here.